The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
It was kind of just a slap in the face.
Endured the unthinkable. Being shot purposely by a 6-year-old student in front of her first grade class while teaching 3 times. School administration was warned by concerned teachers and employees that the boy had a gun on him at the school.
I truly believe that the proper protocol was not followed entirely on the school's end that day.
A Virginia teacher suing an assistant principal for $40 million. It all stems from when the teacher got shot by a 6-year-old student. We're counting down to the all-important opening statements in the trial this morning. Plus, defendant Dustin Duren, his body language, his story. Is it believable? Our experts are weighing in. Also this hour, Doug the bounty hunter's on the case. He's sparking some brand new interest in Ellen Greenberg's mysterious death. And alleged Charlie Kirk assassin scoring somewhat of a win in court. Defendant Tyler Robinson can wear street clothing, but will still be shackled. We'll talk about what's tipping the scales of justice in that case. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Tuesday morning to you, my friends. Welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julie Grant. We got a tremendous show planned for you, so let's get started as we always do. Grab that cup of coffee or tea, or if you're across the pond, whatever you're having at lunchtime, it's time for my opening statement. Let the cameras roll. The defendant, accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk, wants to keep the cameras out of the courtroom. His lawyers argue it will taint the prospective jury pool and jeopardize his right to a fair trial. They say after his first court appearance, the public scrutiny of his appearance and his movements was happening excessively because of what was shown in the courtroom. Well, when you pick up murder charges, public scrutiny usually comes with it. What did defendant Tyler Robinson think was going to happen next after he allegedly confessed to his lover that he assassinated Charlie Kirk? Do you think a walk in the park was what was coming next? No, criminal charges and a trial, if he so chooses, are what comes next. And in Utah, cameras are permitted to film and photograph court proceedings. We've seen time and time again with the trials that we broadcast here on Court TV that the cameras have zero bearing on the fairness of the trial. We see defendants get a fair trial with intense public scrutiny time and time again. Examples, O.J. Simpson, Casey Anthony, Karen Reed, just to name a few. The jurors aren't watching the trial on TV. They're not allowed to do that. So it sounds to me like this defendant just wants some special treatment. But he's not special. And I suspect the judge will deny his request to exclude the cameras. But yet still, that judge will ensure that Mr. Robinson receives the fair trial that he's entitled to receive. This was a murder meant for the world to see. The trial seeking justice for Charlie Kirk should be seen by the world as well. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
The report lays out a concerning trail of evidence that apparently shows efforts by the school division to downplay disciplinary records prior to the shooting even taking place, and then hide them afterwards.
Not only do I have the physical challenges that I do now, my emotional challenges or, mental challenges are a lot.
In Virginia, our newest trial begins this morning. We're calling it the first grader shoots teacher civil trial for Abby Werner. So Werner, you may recall, was shot by a 6-year-old student in her classroom back in 2023. And now she's suing the school's vice principal, Ebony Parker, for $40 million. The jury is expected to report at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Opening statement set to happen at 9:30. We're going to take you in there live as soon as everything begins. Right now, though, let's turn to your top story here on Opening Statements. We've got the closing arguments set to begin in less than an hour in the murder trial of defendant Dustin Duren. So what did you think of this guy? And what does the jury think of him? Well, he's accused of murdering the mother of his 2 daughters. The victim in this case, Caitlyn Naffziger. Well, Duren says that she's not the victim. He says that he had to shoot her in order to defend himself and defend his children. And he took the stand in his own defense and told the jury just that.
It was like muscle memory. It was like training coming out to where I didn't have to think about what was happening. It was like I was trained for this, and this is what I'm supposed to do. I take the 2 steps over, grab the gun. As I'm taking probably the 3 steps back over, I'm chambering around into the gun. I grab Ellen by the shirt collar, the front of her shirt collar. I pull her forward, not to me. I pull her forward to get some sort of distance between her and Caitlyn, pull her forward, and then fire.
So is this defendant believable? Well, let's ask our experts, see what they think. In the studio, high-profile criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor. I call him Nall-Pros Noah. Noah Pines is here with us. Good morning. And joining us remotely, behavior expert and jury consultant and author Susan Constantine. Susan, good morning to you as well. All right, so we're going to tackle this guy's body language and then tackle how the attorneys representing him deal with what he did on the stand. So, Susan, starting with him, his eye contact, it wasn't there. What does that tell you?
Well, there's a couple things that I see. First of all, it's not good with a jury because a jury is already going to judge him based on the fact that he's not making eye contact. However, lack of eye contact is not a deceptive indicator. Rather, someone that is focused in and eyes open with less eye blinking is more of a deceptive indicator. So this is where it's a problem because this should have been brought out prior. One of the attorneys should have talked about his body language and lack of eye contact could have been connected to his PTSD, and that's the reason why he does what he does. So he's more internal, he defocuses, he looks down in what they call this internal processing. That's the reason why he does what he does, and all these little sharp little darts over to make eye contact, all could be part of the PTSD. That's what I would have explained away if I were working for the defense.
That's really interesting. Now, if you're working for the prosecution, could there be a fair argument made that he's being deceptive, that members of the jury, he couldn't even look at you when he was telling that bogus story?
Yes, and just the opposite. The fact that he can't make eye contact, I would have played right into the fact that he can't even make a connection with individuals. So he's very planned and organized. The fact that he's like that gives you insight of how he planned and orchestrated this throughout. So I would have played that card. The fact of eye contact, he's not even paying attention to. He seems lacking remorse. He can't even connect even more than a microsecond. All of this could be indicators that he's being deceptive. That's what I would have done.
I really appreciate that. So they get a chance to perhaps clean things up a bit in close today, Noah. What do you think needs cleaning up with this guy and why?
Well, Susan's right. First of all, I would not have dressed him in a suit. It just doesn't fit him. And this isn't a self-defense case. Even accepting what he says, it doesn't sound like self-defense. It is more of this PTSD or some sort of snapping that probably happened, something that triggered him. And you can see that through his body language. I mean, he's trained military, right? And you should really lean into that. And those are kind of conversations you have to have with clients. I have to tell clients, like, you think you're doing a good job, you're not. Clients who move around in their chair or do this or start doing this, I'm like, whoa, what are we doing? We have to pretend like we're in front of a jury right now, and you have to sit there and not move around, and you have to answer questions, and you can't hesitate.
Yes. I love the legal analysis you just gave us there, Noah, that essentially it sounds to me like they might have picked the wrong legal theory in your view, where he's saying self-defense, defense of others, where you're saying that's really not going to fly. This is more of a heat of passion type,
you're
temporary.
Trying to mitigate it, right? I mean, you're not going to get around the facts.
Right.
in self-defense just seems the wrong avenue, if you ask me. And I don't think you're going to get any sympathy from the jurors, because it's going to be like, well, it's not self-defense. Whereas, you know, if you somehow got in more of this PTSD, like Susan said, or more of the military stuff, then you could potentially get some sympathy.
Yes, that makes sense. Susan, speaking of that, he got emotional at one point. At one point when he was talking and saying that he realized that he had shot Caitlyn, the mother of his kids. Let's look together at that clip now.
This wasn't just someone that I shot. This was Caitlyn. This was someone that I cared about, who was important to me and my family and my kids. This wasn't just some random person. And I immediately felt horrible. And I didn't understand what was going on. Like, why was this happening? What just happened? Why was this happening? I didn't understand it.
Susan, what do you think of what he said there?
Okay, so let me explain to you what's happened. When he was in this moment, he lost emotional control. His cognition, the way he was trained in his breathing and so forth, when he was targeting, when he was in that kind of what we call yellow or green zone, and he talked about militarily, that when he started to rise in that level of threat, his cognition went down, his emotions went up. He is actually reliving his thoughts for afterwards, not at the moment, at afterwards. She said, this is a person. Now, he dehumanized her. He should have said, was my wife, or this is my wife. So he didn't connect that connection warmth. So that relationship had already deteriorated. The other thing is what I see is there are only just a fraction of sadness. You don't see the chin balls popping up. You don't see what we call these corrugator muscles that actually causes 3 lines across the forehead, which is the sadness and pushes the eyebrows up. There wasn't that. There was a slight little hesitation in his vocal tone, and so it did create some stress indicators, but not enough for me to really hone in on it, and I don't think the jury is either.
Susan, a great insight. Let's take a step further and let's go to the cross now and see what he did here. This is where he's challenged on his truthfulness. No, I want to come to you on the other side. Here we go.
Well, Mr. Duren, you wanted to talk to the police, correct?
I did, yes.
You knew that you were talking to them about the murder of Caitlyn Naffziger, correct?
At no point did I ever think that this was a murder.
You knew it was important when you talked to the police to tell them everything, correct?
Well, even he said that there was a million things that I would probably think of to say.
And those million things are actually the details now of this offense, correct?
I take my oath right now very, very seriously, and I'm telling the truth.
Okay, Noah, what'd you think of that clip?
No points scored by the prosecutor. I mean, he gave good answers, I mean, you know, to every one of those questions. Now, she might have scored some other points, other areas, but those were good answers in my book.
He finally looked up, huh, Susan? He finally was looking up when he was in the fight with the prosecutor. What'd you think of him there, Susan? Did you believe him as he was saying he's telling the truth?
Yes, and I'm gonna take the defense side on this one. And you know, usually I'm pretty good at calling people out, Julie. And what he did is, when he punctuated every one of the movements, he actually moved with the words on sync, on syllable, on word. So they were congruent. So I think at that moment, I do believe he did not think at that moment that this was murder. I think that at that moment, he lost emotional control, but he was not even thinking, because at that point, he had already lost his cognition. He wasn't even thinking clearly. He was flooded. So when you look at his body language and his facial expression, he is making eye contact, and everything is in sync. There was a slight pause when he answered the first question. He said, "I did," and then he shook his head, yes. So there was a little delay, so he actually had to think about it. So what that's telling me is there were 2 opposing thoughts. He did, but he didn't. But then he came and brought it back in at no time, pause, in between every word to carry it home. So question is, did he practice that beforehand? So he was very adamant about it. And I wouldn't have taken any points away from him. I thought that he actually did a good job in his saying and believing what he said was true to him at that moment.
Susan Constantine, appreciate your analysis of his behavior and the body language. We'll see if the jury feels the same way. Today's closing day, so we may get a verdict this afternoon. Susan, thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll see you soon. Noah Pines is sticking with me in the studio. Please do the same at home. You can get some more coffee. We got 4 minutes and we're right back, and we're talking about the mysterious death of Ellen Greenberg. Yeah, we're not letting this case go here on Opening Statements. What happened to her? Well, guess what? They got some new efforts in the investigation as Dog the Bounty Hunter is joining in the quest. Plus, the mother of baby Emmanuel Harrow in court today. Dad already pleaded guilty to murdering the precious child. So what can we expect to happen with Mom?
Appropriate to have a press conference because it was the defendants in this case that had a press conference first. And they did so in order to tell the public, the media, and ultimately law enforcement that their child had been kidnapped, when in fact that's not what occurred.
You did willfully and unlawfully murder baby Doe, initials EH, a human being. I admit.
The Court TV podcast will return.
They said something about suicide, which I never considered for 1 second. Never, ever, ever would she do that.
It's like somebody punches you hard in the stomach, and again, and the air goes out of your lungs and you can't breathe.
With Ellen Greenberg's family still searching for answers, Dog the Bounty Hunter is joining the investigation. Greenberg found dead in her apartment in 2011 with some 20 stab wounds. Some of those wounds were to her back. That's right, in the back of her neck. Look at this. The Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office came to differing conclusions about the manner of death. First said homicide very briefly, then changed it to suicide. Then that medical examiner came off of that, said it's something other than suicide. Now the current ME is saying, yeah, it's a suicide. But Dog the Bounty Hunter is announcing his involvement, possibly bringing some new life to this investigation. The self-proclaimed #1 bounty hunter in the world posting this message on Sunday via X, saying, quote, "My team is in contact with Ellen Greenberg's family." So we're asking, will Dog get the job done? How is he going to impact this case? Let's talk about it. Let's bring in our law enforcement expert guest, Manuel Gomez, private investigator with Black Ops Private Investigators, retired military and retired NYPD, and retired homicide detective, now the chief of police, Chris Anderson. Good morning to you both. All right, so let's talk about Dog. How's he going to impact this? What do you think may happen with him injecting some new spirits, shall we say, into this fight that's gone on for quite some time? Manuel, will you start us off, please?
Well, I would say, Dog is not the right person. I mean, he doesn't have experience in murder cases, okay? And in the TV show, he really hunts down people who are wanted for drunk driving, smoking weed, and little minor crimes. He does not have this experience. The Greenberg family, if you're listening, please hire a seasoned investigator with homicide experience. This guy is about showing, not about doing. You need to have someone who has the experience, who can hunt these guys down. Please go on the investigators' websites, vet them properly, and see what kind of cases they solve. If you don't see it, and if you just see a white guy taking a picture of a guy kissing a girl, hang up the phone, go to another site. Please hire a seasoned investigator.
All right, Chief Chris Anderson, what do you think is going to happen with Dog joining the investigation? How will he impact, in your view?
So, I'm not a fan of television shows jumping in and calling themselves helping out open investigation cases. I've seen the impacts when a person that is not seasoned in homicide investigations jump into open cases, and it can have a terrible effect on those cases, because there's information that they may stumble across, not realize that it's how important it is to a case, and it could actually ruin the case. So, you know, this is a terrible, terrible, terrible situation. And I think the family deserves some form of justice. This may not, I'm not going to say may, this absolutely is not what needs to happen in a case like this, because one thing, this family hadn't seen justice in a long, long time. And also, if what I've seen is the absolute truth and fact, there is a murderer running around in this area, and he needs to be apprehended.
And let's talk about that. Great segue, Chief. Thank you. So, looking at the most recent findings from the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office on Ellen Greenberg's death, they recently issued a 32-page report, so a different ME than who did the initial autopsy. This ME, Dr. Lindsay Simon, concludes that the manner of death is classified as suicide. She says at the time of her death, Ellen Greenberg was suffering from anxiety over her work as a school teacher. She had an increase in energy to act on her anxious thoughts. Simon goes on to say in that same report, the pattern of wounds was admittedly unusual. Simon added that the fact remains that Ellen would be capable of inflicting these injuries herself. Wounds were consistent with hesitation wounds, tentative, self-inflicted injuries that can precede a fatal wound. All right, so it's been more than 14 years. Philadelphia County isn't changing its position on this one, but I have a feeling the Greenbergs are going to try to appeal to anyone and everyone they can to try to get this case reopened and the situation re-examined. So I want to ask you two, very seasoned pros you both are, what other investigatory steps need to be taken now? Manuel.
Well, first of all, the entire investigation in the beginning was sabotaged because of the examiner stating that this was a suicide. So the detectives more or less stopped the investigation. So now we got to go back to the beginning. Second of all, I just want you to note, you know, the medical examiner's office was sued. They settled out of court with the Greenberg family. Okay, this is still not labeled a homicide. It needs to be labeled a homicide because then the statute of limitations never ends. So we, detectives and seasoned investigators, can turn around and find the evidence needed to do this case, no matter how long it takes. And we need to go back to the very beginning of the original suspects. All of that was dropped. It has not been done because of the medical examiner's office. And that's what I would do, is start back from the beginning and then retrace all the steps that weren't completed and complete them.
Oh, and bingo was his name. Oh, Manuel, you just raised such a good point. So when there's a determination of suicide, case closed. No investigators are looking at it, right? Chief Anderson knows it's not coming to your desk, Chief, is it? No, it's not going to the prosecutor's office. Nobody is getting any case file. It's the buck stops there. But even if the designation was undetermined, even if they are still unwilling to say this was a homicide, even if they said undetermined, Chief, you're nodding. I know you know what comes next. It's off to the races for you and your people, right?
Right. You leave you leave this victim's family some hope if you determine the case to be undetermined. It doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be labeled as a homicide. You can make it undetermined, and that still gives the investigators in this case some leeway in order to prosecute it. But now you've created even more of a mountain for them to climb by determining this case now as a suicide, because that's going to follow, even if you arrest somebody, even if you come back and make a determination that it is a homicide, that case being determined as a suicide now even creates another mountain for the investigators to climb in order for them to prosecute the person that's responsible. Even if he walked in tomorrow and said, okay, I murdered this woman, I stabbed her 20 times, and this is how it happens. You still got to climb that hill, and there are so many other hills that'll have to be climbed. And I'm just like my other partner on this video. I feel as though you have to go all the way back. You can't start a homicide investigation halfway through. You have to start at the very beginning, from the crime scene, exhuming the body, going back and talking to some of the initial witnesses, talking to some of the doctors, talking to everybody that was involved in this case, including her husband, about how this may have happened. So yeah, there's no jumping in the middle and saying, okay, we'll start here. No, you have to go completely from the very beginning of this case. You have to start it entirely back over.
Yes. Chief, who would you send your detectives to talk to first? Who would be the first person you would want to interview if you could go back in time?
The family. The family, without question. I'd start off with the family.
Really?
Start off with the family, then you go to the house, the actual murder scene. And then from there, wherever the investigation leads you is where you go.
And by family, do you mean her parents? Is that who you would talk to first? Her mom and dad? Interesting.
Absolutely.
Really interesting,
Absolutely.
Chief. Okay.
Without question.
This is great. Manuel, I see you nodding. Is that where you would start as well?
Absolutely. And not only that, but then I would start off with the boyfriend as well. Try to go back, see the phone records, where she was, retrack her digital history. We have to go back to that beginning. Remember, like my partner just said, it is a situation that is horrendous because it was stopped midway. And now we have to go back to the beginning. So yeah, I would go back to that boyfriend because he's a key suspect, in my opinion, in this case.
And you know, you said something about her digital history, Manuel, that got me thinking. When you said you would retrace it, you and Chief know that the uncle of the boyfriend, or the fiance's uncle, came in early on and took all the devices from the apartment, interrupted the chain of custody. So her search history potentially could be tainted, could be jeopardized. Who knows what he did? Why is he going in there? We're going to do another segment on that. Boy, how would I love for both of you to interview him, that uncle, the fiance, all these people. Line them up for Chief Anderson and Manuel Gomez. We'll get the job done here. Boy, gentlemen, thank you so much. You always teach us so much. And thank you both for your wonderful service. We'll see you soon. We're going to hit a break. When we come back, we're spotlighting the murder case of little baby Emmanuel Harrow. Mom in court today. What's going to happen with her? Plus, accused assassin Tyler Robinson scored somewhat of a legal win this week, but the judge still has to make a big ruling on cameras in the courtroom.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
Welcome back. This morning, we're spotlighting the murder of baby Emmanuel Harrow. And his mother, Rebecca, is expected to be in court today. So the little baby's remains still nowhere to be found. His father, Jake Harrow, tearfully pleading guilty to his murder. Before the plea took place, he was begging for whoever killed his baby to come forward. Remember this?
We come to you guys asking you to help us find our son. He was abducted last night from Big 5. Somebody struck my wife while she was trying to change his diaper. And we just ask if anybody knows anything to please contact Ukaipa Police Department.
Don't hesitate, just call.
Now, Jake Harrow wasn't the only person standing there. Mom was too. So what's going to happen with Rebecca today? She has what's called a settlement conference scheduled for charges of murder and filing a false police report. What does justice look like for her? Does it look the same as the justice for the baby's dad? Let's talk about that with our guests in the studio. With me, high-profile criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Noah Pines, and joining us remotely, former prosecutor and law professor Melba Pearson. Good morning to you both. All right, so I want to start with the prosecutor's lens as we look at this case. Looking at Rebecca Harrow, Melba, I got into a really fascinating conversation with some of my colleagues in the newsroom about how, we can't assume that she did the same behavior as Jake Harrow did, right? Her culpability may be far less if she has any at all here. Would you speak to that, please?
Of course. Good morning, Julie and Noah. And of course, you have two people, so they can have two different courses of actions. We can't rule out, I mean, this is October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we cannot rule out the possibility of domestic violence in terms of the husband being the main abuser and being the one that caused the child's death, and then the mother standing by, potentially afraid of being harmed, so she kind of goes along with things. So that is a possibility. Not saying that's clear here now, but that is a possibility. Or again, she may have just been present, knew what was going on, and did not protect her child for whatever reason. So there could be a multitude of reasons why she didn't act up or do more. And of course, there is a scenario where she is fully guilty and fully culpable as well. But we can't ignore any of those options as we get close to the conclusion of this case.
Yes, you explained that so well, Melba. So let's take the scenario, just for the sake of our analysis here today, Noah, that let's say that she did not kill the baby or abuse the baby. Let's say that was all dad over the course of time that police have theorized it took place in. Let's say that when it was time to dispose of the child's body, that she was told to keep her mouth shut. And we know that she had a visible bruise around her eye when she was pleading for the public's help. She claimed it came from the attackers who kidnapped the baby, but we know that wasn't true. Let's say she is a victim of domestic violence here, and let's say that the worst she really did was file a false report and obstruct justice here. Tell me what you'd be asking for if you're her defense counsel.
So in your scenario, she has absolutely no involvement in the death of the child and no knowledge that her husband was abusing the child. Is that our, all she did was cover it up after the fact?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, if all she did was cover it up after the fact, she's not going to go to prison for that. I suspect that there's a little bit more knowledge potentially of what was going on during that time. I mean, as a mother, you don't know what's going on with your child.
Right.
I mean, that I don't buy.
So
now,
in that scenario,
whether it's mitigated, and I've seen that happen before, both in domestic violence situations and other situations, where even the husband is charged with some sort of negligent homicide for failing to protect the child from the mother. So I've seen it all over. And obviously, these things are complicated, but it's really important to find out what she knew and what involvement she had. And maybe we're going to find out that from him, maybe?
Maybe. What if, let's just say she did know. She did know, but she was frightened of him because let's say she's being abused as well. What happens?
I understand that there's a domestic violence. If there was a domestic violence avenue to it, you as a mother still have to do something to protect your child.
Sure.
So you don't get off, maybe your guilt is mitigated or your punishment is mitigated, but your role as a parent, I don't care what side you're on, is to protect your child.
Amen.
Right? Every mother or father would jump in front of a car for their kid, and that's what you have to do.
Right. So Melba, playing that scenario out, let's just say that this mother, because if history is any clue, this guy is probably the one who caused this child's death because he beat his daughter previously so badly she is physically disabled for the rest of her life permanently because of the beating he inflicted. And that was a daughter to another woman. And so then here we have this other child, which makes me think Rebecca Harrow may not have been actively abusing the child. But let's say she just knew and didn't do anything to stop it, call police, call someone, for some help, get the child to safety. What would you do as a prosecutor with her? Do you make any amendments?
Absolutely, absolutely, because I'm going to have to disagree with my co-counsel Noah on this one. But when you have someone that is in the throes of a domestic violence relationship, and I was a former domestic violence prosecutor, handled homicides, all of that, it is not as easy and cut and dry as people make it seem. The reality is she may be fighting or wanting to protect her child. But again, if the person her partner is abusive and is beating her and is also beating the child, there's only so much that she can do, especially if he may be controlling access to money, maybe controlling access to people, making it difficult for her to call and get help and all of that. There's a lot of risk that's involved involved, and survivors in domestic violence relationships have to make these split-second decisions time after time as to what's going to assure their safety as well as that of their child. So if I was presented with a scenario where it was clearly domestic violence was involved, depending if she's willing to testify, that could play into things. But I'm thinking more along the lines of child endangerment maybe, and maybe accessory after the fact. Again, it all depends what the evidence is and what substantiation, what substantiating evidence I have, corroborating evidence to show that she truly was a victim or survivor of domestic violence. But I would reduce the charges.
Yeah, great points, Melba. So when we think about the idea that somebody could testify here, many of us in our newsroom were shocked, and I think a lot of our courties were at home, that it was Jake Haro who pleaded. I mean, in just a straight-up plea to the indictment. He wasn't given a deal. This was just throw himself at the mercy of the court early. And that's great to see. It's great to see resources not being wasted. It was great to see him cooperating. He did go to the site where it was believed that baby Emmanuel was left. The site did not turn up the baby. Doesn't mean that the baby wasn't there at one point in time. He's just not there now. So now that he's pleaded, Noah, what do you think? Does that cause her to lose some power in deal making with the state? Because they've got him. They've got the real bad guy.
There's no deal to be made. Right? And it is early to plea, and there has to be some benefit for him to do it now. And I mean, you could say, well, he just did it because it was the right thing to do. Yeah, I mean, in my 30 years of experience prosecuting and defending people, typically that's not the reason why people plead guilty early on. There's some benefit out there for them.
Yeah, and so this is interesting. I'll be very curious to see what happens today. Their cases had already been scheduled on different dates. It wasn't like they went to court together last time. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get a plea from her too today. But really great points you both made on this one. We'll see what happens. Friends at home, stay right there. When we come back, we're talking about the man accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk, now being permitted to wear street clothing for his court appearances. But he's not stopping there with the asks. He's wanting cameras kept out of his trial. We'll discuss that next. And a live look in the courtroom in Virginia. We're getting ready for the opening statements to kick off in the case of teacher Abby Zerner, who's suing the vice principal of her school for $40 million after she was shot by a 6-year-old student.
This is the Court TV podcast.
Gunshots heard near the library at UVU. They're trying to lock the library down now, still gathering. Maybe the CS building is just east of the library. He's wearing jeans, black shirt, black mask, long rifle. We do have officers following the victim to Tiffin at the hospital. 418 copy. How many injured do we have? It's just one person.
A recent ruling in the case for the man accused of murdering conservative political activist Charlie Kirk. This ruling could be tipping the scales of justice in his upcoming trial.
The court finds that Mr. Robinson's right to the presumption of innocence outweighs the minimal inconvenience of permitting civilian attire, and Mr. Robinson shall be dressed as one who is presumed innocent. Accordingly, the defendant's request to appear in civilian clothing for all pretrial proceedings is granted. Defense counsel is directed to coordinate with the jail to ensure that this order is implemented, and the court further orders that if the clothing be provided 72 hours prior to any hearing.
That was Judge Tony Graff agreeing to allow defendant Tyler Robinson to appear in court wearing civilian clothing. So that could mean a suit, that could mean a sweater, whatever he prefers. Robinson's attorneys argued that this was needed to ensure that jurors aren't going to be tainted by seeing the defendant dressed in jail clothing, that they may develop a bias against him, depending upon how they feel about seeing him in the suicide vest like he's wearing there, or an orange jumpsuit. So Robinson's going to remain shackled during these court proceedings, though still. So that was a wish he didn't get. The judge says he's too much of a safety risk to have him unshackled. Members of the media are going to be prohibited from taking or filming his restraints, though. So the judge is restricting what the media can show in terms of those shackles. Now, Robinson has also requested that there be no cameras in any of his court proceedings. You guys know how I feel about that. If you're seeing my opening statement, let's talk about that with our guests. Let's bring in our legal eagles, Noah Pines and Melba Pearson. Okay, so let's tackle all of these. Let's start with the cameras. Why don't we? That's something we feel passionately at Court TV about. What do you think, Noah?
No cameras, no Court TV, right? No, I mean...
We don't want that.
We don't want that.
Nobody wants that.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with cameras in the courtroom. You know, if someone's going to be disqualified from this case, it's not going to be because they saw some coverage, you know, on the TV regarding the case.
Right, the juries aren't allowed to watch what's on TV.
Right.
That's a good way to get thrown off the jury, isn't it, Melba? The judge gives them an instruction, right? If they're watching, you know, anything, social media, all of that, it's a no. Tell me, how do you think the judge is going to come down on this, Melba?
So I think the judge is going to kind of be in the middle on this one. So he may kind of like the ruling he just did where he allowed media to be in the room, but they couldn't film certain things. I think he knows that this is going to be a matter of great public importance. That's usually the standard that judges use to determine whether or not this is something that should be publicized. Obviously, you know, everybody's very interested in what happens in this case. So I think he's going to allow media, but he's going to make sure that to the best of his ability, this doesn't become a circus. So he's going to have very firm rules in terms of, you know, who can come in, who can sit where, you know, phones, all of that. And I think he's going to set forth all of that just to have a balance.
Just some guidelines, yes, some restrictions. And we deal with that all the time. And nobody really even knows because of the way we broadcast the trials and tell the stories. But oftentimes, you know, we'll be told, you know, I'll give you some examples. Gwyneth Paltrow's trial, for instance, really big A-list celebrity, right? And went into civil court. And we were able to film the trial, but the judge had granted a defense motion where we weren't able to fixate on her because the judge was saying this would be unfair for her to just have a camera sitting on her all day long because she's in this court of law. You can show the whole camera and certainly you can show her at different points in the trial, but we don't want just one camera, a Gwyneth camera, so to speak. And, and of course we thought that's totally reasonable. Yes, we're not going to do that to her. We want to just show the whole proceedings and that's that. So that's an example, like Melba said, of how you can show everything, you know, but you can also ensure some extra fairness, like maybe with these pretrial hearings, no photographing his shackles or his stun belt, probably things like that we'll have to abide by. The clothing, how much of a game changer is this? Noah, what do you think, that he's going to be allowed to wear suits or whatever he pleases?
You know, I don't know that it changes the narrative at all. You know, seeing him in a suicide vest, probably not the best thing. You know, seeing him in a jumpsuit, everyone's going to know that he's in custody. So I don't think it's going to change anything. Now, it's an opportunity now for them to start maybe humanizing, the defense to start humanizing him and, you know, making sure that when he appears in court, you know, that they start to set up their narrative. I think that if any defendant wants to be dressed for pretrial hearings, that it's substantive rather than procedural, then they should. I mean, there's no reason not to, right? These are people who are presumed innocent. And if it's a case serious enough where someone feels like I need to be in street clothes, why not let him be in street clothes?
Right.
I mean, you'd want to be in street clothes, Julie.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't want to be in an orange jumpsuit. You'd rather be in your red suit.
Exactly. I'd exactly bring my red suit. And yeah, no, totally. And I agree with what the judge did. Still shackle him, keep everybody safe. So the judge, good judge here. Noah Pines, Melba Pearson, what a great show it was with you both. Thank you so much for the great insight and analysis. And we thank you at home for watching Opening Statement.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.